On every military base, there are always those who stand in the spotlight, the loud commanders whose voices echo across the runways, the decorated pilots whose names are etched in records, the war heroes who draw a crowd with every story. Yet, behind that noise exist others, the ghosts, whose presence is felt but rarely celebrated. They walk among their peers quietly, blending into the rhythm of daily duty, ensuring missions succeed without ever demanding credit. These are the individuals who choose precision over recognition, who understand that the strength of an institution is not just in its leaders, but in its silent guardians. Major Evelyn Ross was one of these guardians. She embodied the essence of discipline and quiet mastery. Her boots always shined, her reports flawless, her aircraft always ready. While others craved attention or chased commendations, she remained steady, content in knowing her work spoke louder than any medal could. She was the kind of soldier whose excellence was invisible to the untrained eye, but unmistakable to those who truly paid attention. For her, greatness was not measured by applause, but by reliability, the unshaken trust that she would always be ready when called. In places like Black Ridge Air Force Base, where competition and bravado often filled the air, as thick as jet fuel, Evelyn was an anomaly. She never sought to outshine others. Instead, she chose to be the foundation beneath them. Her legacy was not written in headlines or ceremonies, but in the countless missions that went right because she was there. Her silence was not emptiness, it was strength. A strength that made her invaluable to her crews, even if her name was rarely spoken outside the hangar walls. The ghosts among us, like Evelyn Ross, remind us that true power does not always announce itself with volume. It often lives in discipline, in consistency, in the quiet pursuit of excellence. They are the ones who never ask for recognition because they know the mission itself is the reward. And when the moment of crisis arrives, it is these ghosts who step forward, not to be seen, but to make sure others live. In the end, it is their invisible strength that becomes unforgettable. For years, Major Evelyn Ross was known more for her silence than her presence. She was the officer who declined ceremonies, who slipped away from celebrations, who never lingered long enough to be the center of a story. Many mistook that quietness for distance or disinterest, never realizing it was a different kind of strength. Silence, in her world, was not absence. It was discipline. It was the sharpening of skill, the narrowing of focus, the patient waiting for a moment that would truly matter. That moment came without warning. An F-15 pilot's frantic voice cut through the static of Black Ridge Air Base, announcing a crisis that sent shockwaves of hesitation through the control tower. Protocols faltered, officers froze, and the weight of uncertainty filled the room. In that chaos, Evelyn did not raise her voice or boast about what she could do. She simply stood, placed her binder on the table, and with 6 calm words, "Then, get me in the air," turned silence into command. Her action was not born from impulse, but from years of unseen preparation. Every hour she had spent in solitude, every decision to focus on discipline rather than recognition had shaped her for that exact moment. While others hesitated, she calculated. While others panicked, she acted. In doing so, Evelyn revealed what her silence had always concealed, a mastery so complete it needed no introduction, only execution. When silence becomes action, it changes everything. It transforms the overlooked into the essential, the forgotten into the unforgettable. Evelyn Ross proved that the quiet ones are often the ones we depend on most when the storm hits. And in that defining moment, the ghost of Black Ridge Air Base stepped fully into the light, not to claim glory, but to save a life. Her silence had always been her strength, but her action made her a legend. In the command room, fear spread faster than the signals on the radar. The air was thick with shouts, alarms, and trembling voices trying to wrestle with the impossible. Every eye darted from screen to screen, searching for answers, but no one dared to take ownership of the storm that unfolded. It was in that sea of uncertainty that Major Evelyn Ross stepped forward, not with thunder in her voice, but with a presence that demanded attention without a single word. Her stillness was louder than the noise around her. She did not fight panic with more panic. Instead, she spoke with precision, short, sharp instructions that cut through the chaos like a blade through fog. Her mind, trained for years in silence and discipline, mapped out possibilities others could not yet see. While the room drowned in fear, she had already found a thread of hope, a strategy hidden beneath the noise. This was not the absence of fear, it was mastery over it. The young pilot's voice on the comms cracked with desperation, a life hanging in balance miles above the earth. Evelyn leaned closer, her tone steady, almost soothing, guiding him step by step through maneuvers that could mean either salvation or destruction. Her calmness became more than a strategy, it became a lifeline. In his trembling hands, he held the controls. In her steady voice, he found the courage to use them. What set her apart was not just knowledge or experience, but the rare ability to bring order where only chaos existed. Leadership is often mistaken for volume, for the one who shouts the loudest or commands the strongest. But in that moment, true leadership revealed itself in silence, clarity, and composure. Evelyn Ross did not just control the situation, she transformed it. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that sometimes the greatest power in a storm is not the roar of thunder, but the calm at its center. High above the earth, Second Lieutenant Brandon Webb gripped the controls of his failing aircraft, every muscle in his body fighting against the pull of fear. The alarms inside the cockpit screamed louder than his thoughts, and for a moment he felt utterly alone. Training manuals, hours of drills, and the confidence of youth. All of it began to unravel under the weight of reality. It was not the machine that threatened to break first, it was him. But then, through the static of his headset, came a voice. Not hurried, not panicked, but calm, measured, and deliberate. Evelyn Ross's voice did not sound like an order, it sounded like an anchor. Each word she spoke carried the weight of certainty, pulling Brandon back from the edge of despair. She gave instructions, yes, but more than that, she gave him belief. In her tone, there was no doubt, no hesitation. She spoke as if survival was not a question but an inevitability. For Brandon, clinging to that voice felt like holding onto a lifeline in a raging storm. Every maneuver she guided him through, every adjustment she demanded, reminded him that he was not navigating this nightmare alone. Her words steadied his shaking hands, cleared his clouded vision, and forced his courage to rise when everything inside him wanted to collapse. In that moment, the aircraft's instruments were secondary. The true instrument of survival was the voice in his ear. When the plane finally stabilized, it was more than a machine that had been saved. It was a young man's life, and with it, the promise of his future. Evelyn's leadership did not come from the volume of her command, but from the steadiness of her conviction. Brandon survived not only because of what she told him to do, but because of how she made him believe he could do it. And that is the power of a leader whose greatest strength is not found in force, but in the voice that carries life itself. For years, Evelyn Ross existed only in whispers. She was the kind of name spoken quietly in hangars, passed down from veterans to rookies like a ghost story you weren't sure was true. Some claimed she had retired quietly. Others swore she was flying secret missions in the dead of night, and a few believed she had left the Air Force altogether. She was not in the flight logs, not in the official records, and certainly not in the spotlight. Yet her presence was felt in fragments, rescued cadets, impossible landings, stories that surfaced only after she was gone. She was a shadow, and the shadow was enough to inspire all. But then, one day, the myth took form. The battered F-15 had just clawed its way back from the brink of disaster, guided by her calm voice. The runway burned with tension. Fire crews on standby, ground staff frozen mid-step. And then the stratotanker came to a halt, the ramp lowered, and Evelyn Ross stepped out. Helmet under her arm, flight suit dusty, boots striking the tarmac like thunder. For a moment, even the roar of engines seemed to bow to silence. Everyone who had once whispered her name now saw her with their own eyes. The ghost was real, the story had flesh, and the legend had returned. What struck them most was not grandeur but simplicity. She did not arrive with fanfare, nor did she bask in the stares fixed upon her. She walked straight toward Brandon Webb, the young pilot she had saved, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Her presence carried weight, but it was not weight she forced on others. It was simply the gravity of someone who had faced chaos and mastered it. When she spoke, her words were few, but they carried the power of a lifetime. You listened. That's what saved you. In those few seconds, the base understood why her name had become legend. Not because she sought to be remembered, but because she lived what others only talked about. That day, the line between myth and reality dissolved. Evelyn Ross was no longer just a whispered story. She was a living reminder of what true leadership looks like. Legends usually belong to the past, but she reminded everyone that sometimes they step into the present, not to seek glory, not to demand recognition, but simply to do what others cannot. And when they do, the world stands still, watching as history writes itself in footsteps across a runway. When the dust of that day finally settled, when the jets were parked and the fire crews dispersed, what lingered was not the roar of engines or the spectacle of survival. It was the lesson Evelyn Ross left behind. She had not stood before microphones, she had not gathered the base for a speech, and she had not demanded a single ounce of recognition. Instead, she left them with something far more enduring: an example. In the silence after chaos, the base realized that sometimes the greatest teachers are not those who lecture, but those who act when it matters most. For Brandon Webb, the lesson was personal. He had felt the grip of fear when his jet spiraled out of control, certain his career and his life were seconds from ending. But Evelyn's voice cut through that fear, steady and unshaken. Don't land, let her arrive. Those words became more than flight instructions. They became a philosophy. He would carry them long after that day, a reminder that skill means nothing without calm, and courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to listen when fear tries to drown you. For the crews, the officers, the commanders watching from the runway, the lesson was collective. They had witnessed something no protocol, no manual, no training schedule could teach. Precision married to humility. Discipline without applause. A pilot who proved that greatness does not need a stage. It only needs a purpose. They realized that heroes are not built in ceremonies. They are forged in silence, in decisions made when no one else dares to move. That lesson spread across Blackridge like fire, shaping the culture of every young cadet who walked its halls. And for the Air Force itself, the lesson was legacy. Evelyn Ross had shown them that the measure of a pilot, or of any leader, is not in medals pinned to a uniform, but in the lives preserved, the missions completed, the unshaken trust earned in the darkest hour. She disappeared back into the shadows the way she always had, but her lesson remained etched into every runway, every cockpit, every trainee's heart. Greatness doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, does its work, and leaves the world forever changed.